Welcome to You're Not Crazy, It's Perimenopause. If you're a woman over 40 and feeling more anxious, not sleeping well, or disconnected from your body, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jenny Smith, functional medicine health coach, here to help you understand what the heck is happening in perimenopause. Each week, we're diving into real-life conversations about how our changing hormones impact anxiety, sleep, and stress, and I'll share simple strategies to help you feel normal again. So grab a cup of tea or beverage of choice, get comfy, and let's dive in. Hello. Today, we are going to be talking about hydration. Hydration is something that we think everyone does, that we are getting enough water, but so many of us are not. And especially with the women that I work with, they are just not getting enough water. So I'm going to talk to you about why it's important that we make sure that we're super hydrated, especially as we get older, and ways to get it in and fun ways to make it tasty for those of you that don't like the taste of water. I think it's just boring and blah. So we will give you some tried and true tips to get that water in. I want to start off with a story. Picture it, Sicily, 1920. I'm just kidding. If you get that reference, you are a Golden Girls fan like me. I love the Golden Girls so much. I actually just rewatched the whole series. I know. I cannot believe that I technically am a Golden Girl because I'm 50 and Blanche was like in her 50s. Anyways, Sophia would always start a story. Sophia is Dorothy's mom, and she would say, picture this, 1924, Sicily. So I am going to start off a story. Picture this, 2017, Doheny Beach. I think that's where we were at. We were camping. My family and I, one summer, we were camping with some friends, and our kids were outside in the sun all day. My daughter was, I think, 8 at the time, and my son was 5. And my daughter, towards the end of the day, when we were getting ready to cook dinner and hang out by the campfire, my daughter was really struggling with going to the bathroom. It's almost like she had a UTI. She was in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort. So I ended up taking her to the local emergency room. I think I called our insurance and I couldn't go to the urgent care. I had to go to emergency, which there had to be like an urgent care that I could have gone to. But anyways, we ended up at emergency. They ran all kinds of tests and they said, she's dehydrated. And I thought, what? And they sat and asked her, like, did you have any water today? And I was like, oh my gosh, did you have water? And she said, no, I had soda, which back then my kids did not drink soda unless we were on a camping trip. My kids weren't allowed to have any kind of soda at home unless we went camping or on a special trip. It was like a treat. Well, I must not have been really paying attention to how much water she was drinking. And I felt like such a terrible mom because they're like, she's dehydrated. She just needs water. And so sure enough, that's what it was. And she was in so much pain before we got there and got her some water, got her hydrated, and she was good to go. Another thing too happened recently, probably 3 or 4 years ago. My son was really, really sick and he passed out in the garage. We ended up, he fell down on the ground. He passed out, fell in the garage, and then he came into the house where he fell again. And he was so pale and so white, and I was freaking out. And I told my husband, we got to take him to the hospital. And my husband's like, he's fine. He's just dehydrated because he was outside playing basketball after he had been sick for 4 or 5 days. And in Arizona in June, it's hot. And he just wasn't ready for that. And he needed more rest. He needed to recoup a little bit more, and he needed to be hydrated, and he was not. So anyways, to make a long story short, we couldn't take him to urgent care. He had to go to emergency because he fell and hit his head, and I was worried about his head, and they don't do CT scans in urgent care. And after getting an IV, doing all these tests, he was just, you guessed it, dehydrated. So as you can see, if we are not hydrating properly, and let me tell you, my son was drinking lots of water, but for some reason the water was not getting into his cells. So he was just really weak and coming off of, being really sick and needing to build his strength back up again. So the IV really helped him. Sometimes we could be drinking all the water and still be dehydrated. And those two lessons of why it's important to make sure that we are drinking enough water is something that I take with me, and what I want to share with you today, that we have to be hydrated. If we're human, we need to be hydrated, but as we're getting older, we really need to focus on prioritizing that, because so many women are having symptoms, are feeling exhausted, they're anxious, they're really hungry, or they're dizzy, or they have headaches. Oftentimes, it's because you just need to be drinking more water. You are simply dehydrated. And I want to talk to you about some of the changes that happen, some hormonal changes that happen in our bodies that require more hydration. So when estrogen begins to fluctuate and decline, women become more prone to dehydration because estrogen helps regulate fluid balance in the body. And when it starts to dip, and it's like kind of all over the place, we start to lose some of that fluid. And that's why we're having like joint pain and brain fog and, having more bloating, things like that. We tend to need more water. And we are also drinking more coffee because we're so tired, because we're not getting good sleep. And we're dealing with a lot of stress. We're not eating enough. We're fasting. We're sweating more, or, just all the things that can contribute to fluid loss and needing more minerals in our body. So sometimes dehydration can look like hormone symptoms. What are some signs and symptoms of not being hydrated enough? And I shared with you being exhausted, anxious, craving food, like you're just really hungry, when really we just need to be hydrated. So you might have more fatigue, more brain fog, anxiety, elevated heart palpitations. Constipation is a big one. Dry eye or dry skin is a result of not being hydrated enough. Having joint aches, like joint pains. Muscle cramping is a big one. And I want to just do a little side note here on muscle cramps. I'm gonna do a podcast on magnesium. But I remember working with a client a couple of years ago. She was having major muscle cramps in her legs. And I said, "Oh, are you supplementing with magnesium? Because that can really help." And she said, "No, but I heard pickle juice really helps with that." And I thought, really? That was the first time I had heard of that. So ladies, if you're dealing with any kind of leg cramps or cramping, try pickle juice. There is something in the pickle juice. I don't know if it's like the potassium, sodium, anything like that, that's in the pickle juice can help with those muscle cramps. I thought it was cool. Had to share it with you. And, hot flashes, if you're dealing with hot flashes, you got to make sure, because if you're sweating it out, you got to make sure you're rehydrating and getting that water in. So let's talk about why hydration is super, super, super important overall for everybody, especially for women in midlife. And being hydrated regulates our body temperature. So if you're sweating a lot more, if you're dealing with hot flashes, making sure that you're rehydrating with water is super helpful. It's important for organ function. Having our organs hydrated really supports our brain, our heart, kidneys, liver. It helps transport nutrients and oxygen to our cells, to our organs. It helps us remove waste. Being hydrated really supports cognitive function. I know that, like with my kids, my son clearly was not in a good headspace when all that had happened to him. So he was feeling just really run down, really fatigued, kind of just out of it, like his mind, he was out of it. And that is like an extreme case. But even if you're sick, right? If you're sick, making sure that you're drinking enough water and making sure that you are counting the ounces of water. So we're going to talk about how to do that. Being well hydrated supports joint health. It helps lubricate our joints. You might have some stiffness or discomfort. Making sure that you're hydrated can help with that. Supports digestion, helps break down food, prevents constipation. And again, like I'd mentioned, it supports our skin health. It really helps keep our skin more plump and elastic, and it can reduce dryness. And if you know that my estrogen episode, I talked about how when that drops, we tend to be a little bit more dry. Our skin's more dry. We have more vaginal dryness. we are dealing with a lot of more achy joints and pain. And that's usually because we're losing the benefits of the estrogen because it's just going south for the winter, going south for midlife. It's no laughing matter. Trust me, we've got to make light of this situation because as long as we know what's happening, then we can do what we need to do to support our body, right? And just making sure that we're hydrated really supports detoxification and it supports our body in many ways, as you can see. And sometimes water alone isn't always enough. Some women don't need just water. They also need minerals and electrolytes too. So we're talking about sodium, potassium, magnesium. Sometimes we might be finding that, hey, I'm drinking a lot of water, but I'm still dealing with these symptoms of fatigue, dizziness, feeling depleted. Sometimes just adding electrolytes or mineral salts can really help with improving those symptoms. So how much water should you aim for every day? What is the goal? Now, everyone is different, but a good general rule of thumb is to take your body weight and divide it by 2. So for example, let's say you weigh 160 pounds, you divide that by 2, you're going to need 80 ounces of water a day. So that's, around 8 to 10 cups a day average. If you're exercising more, if you're sweating more, if you're sick, that's when you're going to need to up the ounces. And everyone's needs are different depending on the climate, your activity level, medications, caffeine. I love caffeine, so I need to make sure that I am drinking enough water, and I for certainly do add the electrolytes into my water. If you're dealing with more stress, it's just really important to make sure that you are staying well hydrated. So what counts as hydration? Herbal teas count, electrolyte drinks can help, and anything like any water infused with fruit, cucumbers. I like to add berries, lemon. Sometimes that makes it easier, especially for my ladies out there who don't like drinking plain water. It's really hard to get it in. You want to look for creative ways to make it a little bit more tasty. And for me, I have electrolytes that I really love, and I add that to my water. And I will link my favorites in the show notes. My tried and true favorite that I use every single day is Redmond's Relight. And I love their mixed berry flavor. I've tried them all. Mixed berry is my favorite. And you can get it on Amazon, and I buy it on their website. So I have a subscription that comes monthly. And if you are international, I'm not sure if they ship international. I'd have to double check for you. I also love Ultima. Ultima is something that you can buy at the store here in the US, and they have lots of flavors. And I've tried so many other flavors, really great tasting. And you can also get those on Amazon too. So some of the ways to make water a little bit more exciting is to add the electrolytes. And then you're also getting the minerals of the magnesium, potassium, things like that. The other thing to point out is that soda and diet soda do not count. Unfortunately, I hate to break it to you ladies, but it does not replace water. It actually, if you are drinking soda every day, you want to make sure you're hydrating enough. Coffee is another one that's not going to count as your hydration. Unfortunately, it's what I drink a lot of, but it's not counting as our hydration for the day. So if you are drinking coffee and soda, you want to make sure that you are adding more water to your day. So just to recap, we want to aim for half our body weight in ounces of water. So whatever your body weight is, divide that by 2, and that's how many ounces you should be drinking every day. So how do we get that in? I hear so many women tell me like, it's just so much water, and then I'm up all night peeing, and that's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure that we front load our water intake and get it as soon as we can in the morning before closer to bed, because sleep is super important and we don't want anything interrupting our sleep and having to wake up to go to the bathroom. So here are some tips. First things first, drink water as soon as you wake up. So whether that's getting up, let's just say your alarm clock goes off, you roll out of bed, you either grab some water right away. I always have water on my nightstand, always. Sometimes I drink it in the middle of the night, especially here in the summer in Arizona. it is so hot and dry that I wake up so dry sometimes in the middle of the night that I have to drink. So I have water by my bed. And as soon as I wake up, I go to the bathroom and I drink some water. I guzzle it as much as I can while my coffee is a brewing. I am one of those women that I have to have my coffee right away. It brings me joy. I don't know if it's the most ideal, but it's what I'm doing and it's working for me right now. So I just make sure that I drink my water first thing before I have my coffee. You also want to make sure that you always have a water bottle with you wherever you're going. That way you can sip on water as you're going throughout your day. There are different tracking apps that you can use to remind you to get your water in. So maybe drinking water right before you eat might be a good reminder, like, hey, I'm going to sit down and have breakfast or lunch and dinner. I'm going to drink some water before I eat, which will also help with satiation too, so that you don't overeat because you're hydrated. So essentially that's pairing hydration with habits. So you can roll over after the alarm clock goes off, drink your water, or after you go to the bathroom, drink your water. Something that's going to trigger you like, hey, I need to drink my water. I always have water next to me at my desk. I take my water with me every time I go somewhere. And I am always going to the bathroom. My kids are like, you always go to the bathroom, Mom. And I'm sure part of it has to do with menopause and also drinking a lot of water. And I don't mind it because I know how important it is. And so I'm drinking as much as I can. And then I try to shut it down right before bed. So ideally you want to cut off drinking an hour before bed because you don't want to be up all night, going to the bathroom. You can just suck on ice or just take tiny sips because you don't want to, like I said, waking up in the middle of the night. So if you are realizing, hey, I've only gotten 20 ounces today and I need 60 more ounces, you don't want to drink 60 ounces right before bed. That's just going to create a miserable night for you. So just be very creative with how you get it in, and preferably during the first half of the day. Now, if you're not used to getting what you're supposed to be getting every day, slightly increase it every week. Let's just say you're supposed to be drinking 80 ounces, but you're drinking about 40. Every week, just try to increase it a little bit more until you get to that 80 ounces. I know that's what's worked for other clients is they will fill up pre-filled water bottles and have it handy in their kitchen, and they'll just take the water bottle and they'll know, okay, well, I've just had 16 ounces. I just had another 16 ounces, and they count it and set it up, and they'll do that. Or they'll fill a jug with 80 ounces of water if that's what they need, and they just drink out of that jug all day to make sure that they've gotten it. I typically drink out of a 40-ounce cup, and I refill it about 3 times a day. So I know that I'm getting well enough of the water that I'm supposed to be drinking. So just really emphasizing how important hydration is. Don't stress over it. Like if you're not used to drinking that much water, take baby steps until you get to the water that you should be drinking, the amount that you should be drinking. You don't need to be carrying a gallon jug around all day like those gym bros do. No offense to the gym bros, because that's honestly a great way to go about it, because you have a gallon jug and you're like, okay, this is my goal. This is what I need to be drinking every day. But the problem is if you realize you have 40 ounces left, you don't want to be drinking it right before bed. So just be conservative, go easy on yourself, and just really focus on getting the hydration in. Small, consistent habits are what really add up and make a big difference. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have for hydration today. If there's something I missed or you have any questions, you can find me on Instagram at JennyAZ_simple. I also have that linked in the show notes. You can also email me at health@jensmith.coach. Just know that if you've been feeling not great, exhausted, foggy-headed, overwhelmed, start with the basics. Start with things like sleep, protein, managing your stress, movement. I've talked about all these in the previous episodes. And hydration. That can make the biggest difference in how you feel. Those things, they all kind of work together. So wherever you're at, start with what's the easiest to get started with and building that habit. All right, ladies, if this episode helped you, it would mean so much to me if you shared it with a friend. And I'd love to hear what hydration habit you're working on this week. Send me a message on Instagram. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week. Take care.